You are listening to a Freedom Student Ministry podcast.
So Ruth was married to a man, and she was a Moabite, and she went with her. Oh gosh, I've been put on the spot. She lived in another place. She lived in Moab, and she married a man. And then she had a father-in-law and a brother-in-law who passed away. So did her husband. So it ended up being just Ruth, her sister-in-law, and her mother-in-law. There was a famine, and they needed to go back to where the mother-in-law was from because the mother-in-law could be taken care of by her family back where she was from. And as she was going back to her home with Ruth and her sister-in-law, whose name was Orpah, Naomi, the mother-in-law, turned to both Orpah and Ruth and said, "You girls don't need to come with me. Go back to your home. You'll be taken care of there. There's nothing for you where I'm going." So Ruth said, "No, I'm going to stay with you." Orpah said, "I love you. I'm going to cry, but I'm going to go home." Ruth said, "I will go where you go." You guys remember that? "Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God." So she goes back with Naomi. Naomi one day says, "Why don't you go out into the fields and glean and get us some food and maybe even find," I don't know if she said this, but when she was thinking it, maybe even find another thing for yourself. So she goes out and she gleans, which means she picks up kind of the leftovers of the harvest after the other people have already gone through. And she picks those pieces up. As she's doing that, she ends up in the field of a man named Boaz, who's actually the kinsman redeemer for her family, which means that he can marry into that family and make sure that their family line continues on. And the family line wasn't going to continue on because all the men had died in Naomi's family. So he sees Ruth in the field. He says, "Who's that?" His workers explain to him who she is. And he lets her come and get lots of food, get to eat meals with them and eat a lot of it, and even take some home to Naomi. And when Naomi hears that Ruth has met Boaz, she says, "Ruth, go sleep at his feet and tell him that you basically want to marry him so that he can, tell him he's your kinsman redeemer so that he can help our family line continue." So Ruth does that. And Boaz says, "Yes, however, there's another man who's even closer to you than I am. So I'm going to ask him in the morning if he wants to take on your family line." Turns out this man doesn't want to because that would mean he would lose his family stuff and inheritance and things like that. So he says, "No, you marry her." So Boaz marries her, and the family line continues all the way down to the fact that Jesus came from this family line. Jesus was born from the family line of Ruth and Boaz and others as well. So that is the synopsis.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to pray for Andrey and then we're going to get started. Is that cool? Is that cool?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, why don't you come over here? So, you guys stoked to hear some good truth tonight? All right. Riley, do you want to pray for him?
Sure.
Okay.
Dear Lord, I thank you for Andrey. He's just an amazing person. Him and Ivan, him and Ivan, they're just amazing people. Parents raised them right. So thank you for bringing him to this church. He's been a great
Addition.
Yeah, addition. He's been a great addition to church family, and I hope he can stay. And glad to meet his girlfriend, and then maybe she could stay for church also. I just thank you, Lord, for Andrey. It's a rad dude.
Amen.
I'm going to say a quick prayer, and then I'm actually going to share with you my title, and I'm going to wrap something that I felt inspired to wrap for you guys that relates with my message and relates with our lives, but it also relates with the story that I'm going to dive in. So, you guys ready? Joy comes in the morning, close your eyes and embrace the sunshine. Joy comes in the morning, close your eyes and embrace the sunshine. Stephen was only 6 years old when when he was losing his mother from an overdose. Father in jail, in and out, can't escape his lifestyle. Fighting tears, he was adapted. As an orphan, he felt so illegitimate. It seemed like his life looked blacked out. All the sound went out. No more noise in the room in his mind. Mouth shivering, eyes tearing, in the corner fearing. Couldn't understand why this was all happening. He asked himself this question: could it be because of me? All he can remember is his father beating his mother. So much ugly drama, people saying it was karma, or it was the philosophy of Darwin. But no one wanted to bring in the truth. Let that truth sink deep down. Sometimes you may feel like Stephen, lost all hope, feeling incomplete, embraced defeat, tried crying out to the street for help, but kept being put in the backseat. 10 years later, Stephen's heartbeat racing, can't handle the memories that are on repeat. Taking his bedsheet, covering up his face, fighting whether he should pull the trigger, fighting whether he should pull the trigger. Joy comes in the morning, close your eyes and embrace the sunshine. Yeah, heard a voice, took all the breath out of him. The dim room he was in was now beginning to rise. He felt new life come into him, experiencing such a love that he never experienced. It felt like a wheel of chariots arrived. He was perplexed in this mysterious, unlogical variant. He came out of his room radiant, left his atheist belief in the room, fully buried deep down in the hole. He began to believe that he was made of gold, started to stand for something so bold. I want to talk about joy after sorrow. And I'm going to use Ruth as an example of this and people in Ruth. As you can tell, Stephen was a young man, grew up with parents who grew up probably with parents, generational thing where there was brokenness and there was a lack of something. There was a lack of meaning, purpose. There's a grief that took place in their hearts. But sometimes when we don't work with the grief that's in our heart, sometimes it can turn into loneliness, depression. It can turn into things that maybe we don't want it to turn out to become. But because we haven't dealt with the grief in our hearts, we don't see the joy that comes in the morning. We don't experience the joy of the Lord that Jesus promised because we sometimes allow our feelings or kind of the things that happen in our lives, situations or people passing away, take a deep root in us. And I just want to say for everyone in here that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sorrow. It's okay to have emotions. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to be angry. It's okay. You're not sinning when you experience those things. It's okay. Can you look to your neighbor and say, it's okay?
It's okay.
It's okay.
Just be like, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Because without the sorrow process, you may not experience the full joy that the Lord wants to bring because we haven't yet released everything, all the tension that we've built up inside. I'm going to read from Ruth, and I'm going to kind of go back and forth with this thought. I'm kind of reflecting on Ruth and then reflecting on my life. In your shoes, look at this message and reflect it in your life. Like what I'm going to say, what I'm going to preach, I'm reflecting it in my life because it relates to me, and I know that it could relate to you guys. And so I'm not just speaking a message that is distant from me or distant from you. It's actually close to me, and I want to learn how to do this more often. I want to be able to grieve over situations or cry or grieve or be sorrow, but let the Lord come in and heal that. Because there's 3 different people that me and my girlfriend were talking about. There's number 1 person, and you can take notes, this is good. Or if you want a mental note, this is amazing. Whatever you want to do, however you take notes. But number one, the first person is a person who experiences grief but doesn't open up to anyone. That's the first person. Person who has grief, someone died in your family, there's a divorce happening, something is going on that is okay for you to grieve, to be sorrow. It's not wrong for you to feel the way that you're feeling, but it's what you're going to do with it now. So the first person is the person who keeps it to themselves and doesn't open up either to God or either to a close friend that could be able to speak into that life, into that area and pray for you. The second person is a person who remains in that grief for a long period of time where something happens but you cannot get over it. You cannot overcome it. So 5-10 years later, you're still grieved over a lost one or over a situation that happened. You're still, and then what happens eventually, sometimes to people, is that that grief turns into bitterness, or it turns into anger, or you start to manifest it in a way that it's not healthy because you haven't dealt with it. You haven't processed it yet. The third one is a person who doesn't take time to deal with it. There's a person who ignorantly ignores it. Then there's a person who completely says, I just don't want to make time for this. So they end up just being busy to avoid the pain that's happening inside. So they end up carrying on more tasks. They end up playing sports. They end up working out extra. They eat a lot, or they go to drugs, or they tend to watch TV a lot or play video games to get their reality out from the reality of their heart. And they're inside, there's something that they haven't processed yet. There's deep roots that haven't been dealt with yet because you haven't been open about it. And so I want to relate this with our lives, relate this with the scripture, and I want us to embrace our emotional side, embrace the heart that God gave every one of us, humans. He's given us a really amazing heart with emotions, but it's how we're going to steward it that matters. It's how we're going to overcome those difficult moments, those moments of frustration or grief or sorrow or sadness. Like, how do we overcome that stuff? And so that's why I felt like the Lord put it in my heart to make the message, joy comes after sorrow. Because we all experience it at some point of our life. We experience a best friend moving, or it could be you moving somewhere else, and you have all these emotions, but you haven't taken the time to grieve over it. And what that ends up doing is you're actually not letting your body naturally heal itself, because God's created our bodies to process this stuff. That's why sometimes we may feel like we want to cry when something happens. It's because the way God put us together, He put us together so that we would be able to express those emotions and not hide it, and be able to openly communicate it with someone and not feel like, insecure about it. Like, it's something to be like just blessed to know that you actually have feelings. I know for my life, I used to live, when I got saved, I shut off all my negative emotions. Anytime I felt a certain way, or felt bad, or felt for some reason I had these negative emotions that would come like almost like waves at me, and I wouldn't know how to handle it, so I would shut off, and then I would put on a fake smile, telling people I'm okay, I'm good, and I would put on a nice person face, but no one really knew what was going on because my emotions were everywhere. And it could have been that I just haven't processed something. It could have been that I just wanted to avoid it because I didn't want to be in tune with my emotions, because I was like, oh, I'm saved, I shouldn't be feeling this way, so I'm going to reject it and I'm going to shove it aside. But that's not what God intends. Like, the more we shove our emotions, the more we don't acknowledge it, how is God going to heal us? How are we going to go through that process of breakthrough, of restoration, where God can come into our hearts and restore us back to the way He's called us to be? And it takes time sometimes. Sometimes God comes like a fireball, and He strikes you and you feel like you're amazing and a new creation. But sometimes you have emotions that you need to be okay with the process of grieving and being okay with feeling sorrow, crying, laughing, whatever that looks like for you in that season. Now, I'm going to talk about Naomi and Ruth right now. So, if you have your Bibles or you have a Bible app on your phone, this would be great because I think you'll get a better visual. If you have a Bible in front of you on your phone, personally, physically, or if you don't, you can look at your neighbors, and if you don't, you can just listen to me. But Ruth chapter 1, I'm going to start from verse 19. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman said, "Is this Naomi?" she said to them. "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty." You guys remember why? Why is she saying that? Anyone? Why is Naomi saying that? What happened?
Because she lost her sons and husband?
Yes. Thank you. She lost her sons and husband. Good job, Jeremiah. So she's saying that because she lost her sons and husbands. So what we tend to do in our lives, and what I tend to do sometimes, is I become the victim. When something happens, I sometimes, naturally as humans, and this is where we need growth in, this is where we need God to come and speak to us and change our hearts, where we become victims like Naomi was, and she thought God was dealing with her in a way that would cause her husband in that bad situation to happen. So continuing on verse 21, "I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. So here's Naomi and Ruth, who come back into Naomi's city, and she's like, "I'm grieved." You know, someone comes up and tries talking to her, but she was grieved, she was sad, she was a victim. Now I'm going to give us maybe like 20 seconds to think about when have you felt like you were a victim of something? Whether it was like it was a rude joke that someone said and you didn't say anything back, and you felt like you were put in a corner, like you were the victim, or it was like you were rejected when you were younger, like Stephen, where his parents didn't show him that affection. He felt like he was the victim. Or like anyone else. There's many scenarios, but if I'm just going to be quiet, and I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds to think about a time when you felt like you're a victim. If you can think of something, just nod your head. If you can imagine yourself being in that circumstance situation, and you felt like, man, I felt victimized right there. I'm going to scan one more time, just like nod your head if you had a memory that came to your mind. Okay, awesome. It's amazing. See, God never calls us to be victims, but the lie that comes to us the most is because I'm being wronged or treated wrong, or I'm not being valued, or I don't feel like I'm being appreciated or accepted. The lie tends to be a lie directly towards you. And what happens when we become victims sometimes, we like to be the judge. Who agrees with that? When you're a victim and someone does something wrong, you like to be the judge. Or automatically you start to judge that person for what they did, what they said.
Yeah.
Judge them.
Yeah. You pretty much like to be the judge.
You don't.
Yeah. But when you're a victim, that's the first reaction, first response. Someone does something wrong and you right away want to be a judge. But who knows that God's the one who's in the judgment seat? Like He's the one who's the judge. We judge because we were treated wrong. But then you look at Jesus' life, and He was treated wrong, but yet He didn't take that place of in the judgment seat. He actually let people ridicule Him. It's not that Jesus didn't go through the same emotions we did, because He did. But he did it because he had a hope. He had a purpose. There was something that drove him. He was so in tune with his emotions that he knew how to live free from how he felt. So he would get persecuted. He knew how to live above that emotion and say, nope, I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling a victim right now, but I'm not going to manifest the signs and the symptoms of a victim. I'm going to live beyond that, and I'm actually going to be humble, love, and show kindness. I'm going to feed the thousands, yet they ask me whether I'm the Messiah or not. Like, that could be very victimizing for Jesus, because obviously he knows he's a Messiah, but now people are questioning him after they've seen him heal the sick, feed thousands of people with 5 or 4, 6 barley breads and 2 fishes, something like that. He did all this stuff, and now Jesus has a choice, just as we all have the choice to be a victim or not. Now, sometimes we fall in Naomi's place and we become the victim, where we feel like this person has done us wrong or God has done us wrong. Now get this part. Now if we go to chapter 4, this is the best part. This is where hope comes in. Chapter 4, verse 13 says, So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception. Pretty much had sex with her after they got married. And she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, A son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse and the father of David, which later on, Jesus. That same lineage, that same family tree. Do you see the difference? Remember the first time Naomi came into town as a widow, and some lady comes up to her and says, Hey, do you here's Naomi, and here she is returning back with Ruth. And Naomi's like, don't call me that. Call me Mara or Mari, because I don't want to hear that name anymore, because the Lord has dealt me wrong. He's done bad things to my life. And so she became the victim. But later on, you see her heart changing because she allowed a healthy grieving process. I believe that Naomi, it says that she was sad and upset. She grieved. And sometimes it's natural to not be the victim, but sometimes we're confused, we're lost, we want an answer. It's okay to have a misconception of what might be, the understanding, but if it's not truth, you don't want to hold on to that for too long. You might want to go through the grieving process, go through the sorrow, and let the Lord restore your heart. Let Him bring truth into the open. Let Him deal with your heart. Let Him change you. Let Him make you. Let Him speak to you. So, you see 2 characteristics. Naomi, in the beginning, victim. Naomi, at the end, she's proud to be Naomi because she has a great daughter-in-law who just gave birth to her her grandchild, pretty much. And now she has a family lineage that continues. Because what was going to happen was, if Ruth never came with Naomi, Naomi would have just grew old, and her family tree would have cut. There would have been no one to take the place, to take the land, to take care, and to show pride for the family. Because family was a big cultural thing. And so there would have been none of that. So, if you don't mind, I would actually love for everyone to stand up with me right now. Now I'm going to do an activation. And it's okay, really okay for you to cry, because I cry when God touches me, because I know like His presence heals my heart. His presence restores me. I'm going to give us a few moments, a few minutes to close our eyes and to ask God if there is something that you feel like you haven't fully grieved yet, whether it was a breakup, to a friendship breakup, to a family fight or feud that was just not healthy, or something that you just feel like you've been holding on to and you haven't yet released it. You haven't yet taken the time to, and doesn't have to be crying. It can be you just want to laugh because you don't want to carry depression anymore. Joy kills depression. Crying releases the tension. And I know that God uses that, and in His presence, He heals and restores us. So I'm going to take a few moments. I'm going to turn on a worship song, and in a few moments, I want you to pray in your heart or pray outwardly, whatever you feel comfortable. It can be quiet prayer, where you feel like there's an area that you've been a victim in for a long time, or just recently. You feel like you were put in the wrong. You feel like maybe there's someone that you need to forgive or let go of, or something that has happened. I just know that God wants to heal that, and He wants you to feel the freedom to experience His presence, His peace, and His healing touch. And so I'm going to turn on a worship song, and I'm going to give us a few minutes, maybe like a minute or two, to ask the Lord, because He's dealing with some of your guys' hearts. He's dealing with some of your hearts because He doesn't want you to carry any of that anymore. And like myself, being 16, 17, 18, until I was 19, I wasn't in tune with my emotions because I just kind of thought if I shoved it away, it would eventually go. But until I found out, I've buried a lot of things in my heart that had to be uprooted and come out, because it was killing my relationship with people. It was killing my relationship with God, and I needed those things out because I couldn't hold anything on anymore. So we're just gonna take a minute, close your eyes, ask the Lord to show you something that you need to ask Him for help, for healing, or for redemption, or for joy, because it's all about joy after sorrow, experiencing the joy of the Lord, which is our strength.